Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Reverend Dr. Kimmie, and this is the Soul Path Podcast. Now, this particular broadcast is pre-recorded, audio only, due to some technical difficulties today at BoldBrave TV. But I still wanted to get this episode out into the airwaves, into the places where frequency lives. And if you're new here, this is soul deep frequency work. This is truth in real time. This is where we live what others only talk about. And if you've been walking with me, you already know we're not here to perform healing. We're here to embody it. We don't rehearse our evolution here. We live it, frequency first, field aligned, present, activated, and unfiltered. This show exists to cut through that noise and to remind you that walking your sovereign path doesn't require permission. It requires presence. And you're already carrying everything you need. Now, last week's episode title was Soul Revoked. You are no longer subscribed to this reality. We dismantled the illusion of consent, called out the false contracts, and revoked the systems that never had your energetic signature, and made it very clear that your soul never agreed to play by their terms. That episode wasn't just a reset, it was a reclamation. This week, we move a little deeper, not into theory, but into the lived experience of what happens once those distortions are cleared. Because now we're talking about love. Not the version the world scripted. Not the fragile performance built on fear or control. This episode is called Love Isn't Safe, It's Sovereign. And it's also titled, The Heart Knows What the Mind Can't Translate. Because real love doesn't need to be managed. It doesn't need to be defined by logic. It doesn't hide inside labels, compromise, or obligation. It expands. It reveals. It holds steady in the storm and still doesn't lose itself. I'm talking about love as a frequency, non-negotiable, encoded, sovereign. The kind of love that doesn't wrap itself around your wounds. It recalibrates you to your original design. It recognizes you, and in that recognition, it holds the field steady while you come back into alignment. Now, before we begin, I'm going to strike the chime to mark this space as sacred and aligned. Let's begin. So, what we've been taught to see love is as some sort of sentimental dribble, right? We're taught what love is through a distorted lens, one that paints it as delicate and fragile, as if it were a weakness dressed in poetry. But real love is a frequency that recalibrates reality, and it isn't soft, it's sovereign. In this world, we confuse vulnerability with fragility. We confuse emotional presence with submission, and we've been conditioned to believe that keeping your heart open is dangerous, that it's safer to shut down than to let anything all the way in. But the truth is, love has never been soft. It's been treated as soft because it's been feared because of how powerful it actually is. I saw a post the other day, and I'm just going to call it a meme, but it had said, "You have the power, use it." And it was in the middle, had a little teaching from Dr. David Hawkins. And what it said was, one individual vibrating at the frequency of pure love can counterbalance the negativity of 750,000 people who do not. Does that sound like something that is soft and fragile and weak? And as a light worker, I want to tell my fellow light workers, when someone tells you you're not doing all that you can as a light worker, you can refer back to this podcast or that quote, okay? Because love is a force of nature. It's a powerful thing. But we've been programmed to see it as weak and tame, simply to distract us from what it really is. Love is a frequency that shakes the whole damn grid. We're just trained to accept love with limits. And sovereign love is limitless. And it just is. It's what you were made from. Because love, in its sovereign form, simply wants your truth. Love that holds you in your truth isn't always comfortable because it reflects you clearly, without distortion. Your body knows it, even if your mind can't name it. And we've been trained to mistrust our heart. And most people only know love through systems of control, romantic roles, family expectations. That's not love. That's programming. And reclaiming love starts with you. That's frequency. And you will begin to hold that signal. When you start truly holding that signal, your entire field starts to shift. You stop resonating with the reversed versions of love the world has taught you to crave. And you start feeling the difference between what was programmed and what's real. Because what they called love was often just survival. What they mirrored as affection was often just attention. And what they told you was connection was often just control dressed up as care. But once you anchor into the frequency of sovereign love, that kind that doesn't need validation to be real, you start to remember energetically who you truly are. Because that kind of love doesn't echo the matrix. It restores your memory, the memory of yourself. This is frequency work. Holding your own signal, clean, unshaken, unapologetic. You're not running their code. You're running yours. Remember, your heart is a portal, a living interface between the divine and you, the human. The universe isn't somewhere else. It's already embedded in you. And the proof of that is your heart. That's why love, real sovereign love, is a threat to the matrix. Because once you've anchored there, you become unshakable. So now that we've kind of talked about how the heart is not soft, it's sovereign technology, let's take this deeper and talk about the myth of safe love and why control isn't care. You see, your heart is a command center, a transmitter, a memory field that holds data far beyond what the mind can process. It stores signals, coded, energetic truths, some from this lifetime, others deeper. And when you hit one of those memory points, your body responds. You might not trace the response right away. That doesn't make it any less real. What gets triggered in the body isn't always obvious, but it is intelligent because the signal is active and the feedback is precise. This is how the heart keeps you aligned, by broadcasting coherence and exposing interference. It knows what's true. It knows what's off. It knows what you're pretending. When your heart is fully online, bypass is no longer an option. You feel the difference between agreement and avoidance. Because as you're on your awakening journey, there are going to be times when you feel like you're doing what you're here to do, like you're in, for lack of a better word, alignment. But that doesn't always mean everything is perfectly aligned. Sometimes you're just nodding and saying, this is where I'm going, because you're following your breadcrumb trail, right? But there are still things you're avoiding as you go further down your path. And when that happens, those are the signals your body doesn't always give you a second chance on. I say this from personal experience. Those are the ones that will shake you. They show up strongly, so out of sync with where you're headed that it's no longer something you can avoid. The contrast at that point is too loud to ignore. Spirit will always make a way. Spirit will always show you your path. But just because your path is shown to you doesn't mean you're going to see every rock and pebble that may cause you to stumble along the way. Because simply you're not meant to. But the ones that actually do matter, the ones you need to notice, they'll be pointed out. Don't worry. Because if you start avoiding those signs, if you start missing the rocks and skipping over everything, your soul will let you know. It won't let you drift without calling you back. Because whether you want to admit it or not, it knows when you're trying to bypass the parts you don't want to deal with. And that's exactly why control is not care. Care doesn't bypass your truth to maintain peace. It doesn't shield you from your growth or soften the signal just to keep things steady. Control silences. Coherence reveals. And when you're connected to your heart, your actual sovereign center, you stop mistaking the difference. Because care invites alignment. Control demands obedience. And the heart will never bow down. Because the heart was never built to obey. So now let's talk about how sovereign love doesn't shrink you. It reveals you. Because you might be thinking you're playing small to keep peace. And you might tell yourself you're just being humble. Once your soul starts leading the way, you can't shrink without feeling the weight of it. That tension is your signal. That's your own field telling you you've outgrown pretending. Back before you knew what alignment even felt like, you were probably chasing a lot of titles and roles because that's what we're programmed to do. I mean, love tells us we need all this stuff. We need ways for people to identify who we are and if they can love us or vice versa, or we fit in, right? And all of that really is just a matter of validating our existence. And it makes us feel like we matter in the world. You know, that little pat on the head that says, you're doing it all right. But somewhere along the line, when we started this journey of awakening, we understood that, you know, that's all for validation. We started coming into who we are as a person, as a soul, and understanding that we are here to uniquely be who we are. There's no boxes we can fit in. And love that's conditional isn't sovereign. We know that. And at one point, I know you were told to even kill your ego. Ego death is one of the tenets of a person who's been on the spiritual path, right? But we know the ego isn't the enemy. You need some of it. It helps you walk in the world. It gives you direction and drive. Killing it completely doesn't free you. It makes it whisper instead of shout. It still controls the script. It just doesn't do it from behind the curtain. It's no more Wizard of Oz, if you will. But once you start casting off the last of that programming, when you stop chasing approval, when you stop asking the world to tell you who you are, that's when the shift really happens. That's when you start to feel what freedom actually means. That's when you understand what it is to live from a sovereign heart. A heart that knows what it is and no longer negotiates around that knowing. That's the moment everything starts to reconfigure. Not because it's forced, but because your frequency can't lie anymore. You've tried to kill your ego, but still wanted everyone to clap for your progress. That's not alignment. That's chasing a reflection. That's trying to become what they said you should be, not who you are. So when sovereign love moves through your life, it doesn't hand you a new script. It knocks the whole chessboard over. The pieces you were moving so carefully, gone. The game you thought you were playing doesn't exist. And you're not here to win the system. You're here to expose that you were never supposed to need it. Sovereign love reveals you. And not the version that knows how to fit in. It reveals the version that doesn't apologize for existing. And once that's active, everything else starts realigning around it because it has to. Your system won't tolerate the mask anymore. Your field won't support the lie. Else, it only comes from you. It only comes when you are not fighting with your own signal. That's what sovereignty is, when you stop fighting your own signal. Not just being in alignment with your values, but being in alignment with your field, your soul's signal and your heart's broadcast working in phase. That's the foundation of coherence. Because love, real love, is a frequency. It's not an emotion to chase or a role to fulfill. It's a standing wave. And that wave either resonates or it doesn't. Your field is not here to beg for connection. It's here to transmit clarity. So when your heart and soul are aligned, your system stops trying to shrink to stay accepted. You stop modulating your tone, your presence, your essence, just to create the illusion of connection. You stop fighting with yourself. Therefore, you're letting go of the distortion. And here's the truth about that. When you're in resonance, it's effortless. It fits. It flows. If it resists, that's because the signal mismatch is real. Because when you're in coherence, you stop reading connection through approval and you start reading it through frequency feedback. And I'm pretty sure we all do this, especially since we're all more sensitive to energy in our own unique ways. But ask yourself, what amplifies your clarity? What quiets your center? And what drains your energy or spikes your field? That is how you hold your coherence. You tune into your frequency and you stop forcing what doesn't align to fall in line. That's how soul sovereignty works. And connection is about frequency. Let me say that again. Connection is about frequency. It's about signal compatibility. So when you're in that space and your heart and soul are working in tandem, true connection meets you there. Because coherence always attracts resonance. And then your nervous system settles. Because you're no longer bracing for misinterpretation. And you're no longer contorting yourself or your essence to be received. You are simply just being. And that being radiates frequency. This is soul sovereignty. The kind that doesn't seek reflection to know itself. The kind that doesn't trade truth for belonging. The kind that trusts that is what is meant for you will meet you in resonance of your wholeness, not about the performance or your proximity. Because you know who you are. Connection doesn't require effort. It requires presence. And presence, when anchored in truth, is the purest form of love that there is This is where you begin living in soul frequency, embodying it because it's yours, and you're no longer waiting for recognition because you are the recognition. Your presence becomes a tuning fork, and only what's resonant remains. Love, in its sovereign form, is an intelligence. It's not sentimental. It doesn't need reassurance. It's a field that holds without distortion, without condition, and without performance. And when you are in alignment with that field, you feel it not just in your chest, but throughout your entire system. It's a signal that stabilizes you in your own knowing. And from that place, connection becomes a reflection, not a requirement. Because sovereign love doesn't ask you to reach for it. It meets you in your own frequency, and it recognizes itself in you because you're attuned. You're resonating in truth. And that truth, it's a reality. It's the signal of a heart that is no longer performing softness, but broadcasting alignment. So that when love appears, it's clear. It meets you soul to soul, essence to essence, because that's exactly where you've been all along. Love, when it's true, doesn't shrink you. It meets you soul to soul, signal to signal, sovereign to sovereign. We were taught to exchange parts of ourselves for the illusion of connection, for the illusion of peace, for access, for proximity. But that's not union, that is compliance. And true union starts within. It begins the moment you stop outsourcing your stability to start standing in your full frequency without apology, without diluting it. Which brings us into next week's episode. We're going to be talking about the divine masculine and the divine feminine within all of us. The next episode is titled Energetic Union, Reclaiming the Sacred Dance of Masculine and Feminine Within. This is a conversation about the inner relationship between the divine masculine and the divine feminine energies that exist in every soul, regardless of your gender. We all carry both. When your inner union is restored, you're balanced, you're activated, and from that place your field begins to speak before you do. You no longer seek completion outside of yourself because you remember nothing was ever missing. You've become your own safe space, your own direction, your own flow. You're balanced inside. That's what divine embodiment looks like. A life led from the inside out, where your actions reflect a union that no longer needs to be explained, only expressed. So in closing, I want to thank you for walking this path with me today, boldly and in your truth. If today's episode stirred something in you, trust it. And if you want, feel free to reach out to me at revdrkimmie.com, which is my main website, Rev Dr. Kimmie. And of course, you can also find me on TikTok and LinkedIn. So again, thank you for walking this path with me today. Until next time, stay true, stay anchored, and remember, your soul path was never meant to be quiet. It was meant to shake the grid.